Hi everyone, I'm Josh Earl.
And I'm Will Garcia.
And together we're the Hoops Guys. And today we're bringing you our third fan show, aka Friday's Awesome News.
Yeah.
So what's the first thing on the docket, Will?
So the first thing on the docket is my favorite writer about basketball, probably your favorite writer about basketball. Don't want to speak for you, but come on. Zach Lowe, and he's talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. They're not the Milwaukee Sucks anymore. They're actually a thing.
I don't know if it's quite yet fear the deer territory, but...
It's mildly consider the deer when you're driving on the road.
Yeah.
You have to think about them now.
Yeah, you have to consider it for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of that is because of, and as Zach talks about in the article, two of their main players now, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jabari Parker, and the Bucks are really banking on these guys being sort of future franchise players. Personally, I'm not so sold on either of them. I think they can both be really good.
I think Jabari will wind up filling the perceived franchise player role where he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer at some point. And Giannis is going to be hyped up to where people might think he's a star, but I think Giannis' skill set is going to settle in more around like Nick Batum, who I love Nick, but most people wouldn't consider Nick Batum a star or a franchise player. I think a lot of it is the fact that Giannis is super awesome, and a super nice kid. He's freakishly athletic.
He can
and
Euro
long,
step from the 3-point line.
and because he gets on highlights. So I think that's why people are acting like he's going to be a superstar. And who knows? He could surprise us. He could wind up becoming one. But yeah, I don't think I drink the Kool-Aid on Jabari and Giannis being a dynamic duo of franchise players.
Yeah, I can agree with that. When I watch Giannis, it sort of reminds me of, and this is me personally talking, and he isn't quite there yet in terms of team defense, although he is getting much better. But if he can be sort of like a young Tayshaun Prince, but with better shot creation and better facilitation skills.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt skill set comparison. Actually.
That is an insanely valuable player and the sort of guy who I would be hyped about, but maybe not so much the average sort of person who just checks the box score.
Yeah.
But speaking of the box score, something that has nothing to do at all with the box score is that they are hiring more people.
Yeah. Specifically, they're looking to improve their medical staff, their analytics staff, and merchandising, which there's always this huge discussion about big markets versus small markets and stuff like that. But one thing a lot of people gloss over is how saturated is that market, sports-wise. And Milwaukee, you've got a lot of teams in that area already that get a lot more attention than the Bucks.
They also win a lot more.
Yeah,
historically speaking.
It's also close to Chicago, which also has a lot of major teams that tend to win more and are also higher profile. And for that reason, they're looking to also increase the sales staff and the people in the merchandising staff, because their owner was struggling to find merchandise for his friends and family when they asked for it.
To be fair, at least until the past couple of years, is there really any player on this team who you'd want to buy their jersey? I mean, I rock a Giannis jersey.
There's a lot of people. I like Ersan Ilyasova. I love Bogut when he was a Buck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that in fact, I've mentioned before, the Bucks are one of the teams that when I do get free time, they're one of the teams I'm more inclined to try to watch because I like a lot of their players.
Right.
It's just I'm not a fan of bad basketball, so it's kind of like a weird bittersweet thing. But
one thing that this team is really trying to do, and we've probably heard about it, the NBA, and this is a direct quote from the article, the NBA holds an option to buy the team back at a cheap price $575 million according to Brian Windhorst and Mark Stein of ESPN, if the Bucks haven't started construction on a new arena by fall of 2017. And there will be a vigorous debate if the new owners request public funding.
Yep. To their credit, though, they've already pledged $100 million, and the outgoing owner, Senator Herb Kohl, he pledged to match that. So they have $200 million raised already, and they have the looming specter of Seattle as a leverage point to help maybe try to strong-arm the public for a little extra funding. Personally, I think it's stupid to fund a sports arena publicly.
Yeah.
All the studies, every single one of the studies says it's terrible and it doesn't work. I get why teams want to do it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But yeah, there's no reason why the public should fund an arena. And, you know, there is that pressure does raise the leverage that the owners do have, though, with Milwaukee.
I think it might, and this is just me spitballing. This is probably more your lane than mine, but wouldn't it give them a lot more incentive to actually like win some games? Because I don't think the public is going to be super hyped on showing out.
That's why they were trying to win games the past couple years.
Yeah, but
they've been trying to engender more support from the fan base that they hope would carry over into public support for financing a new arena.
Yep, but I can definitely feel that getting a little bit hot.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting thing to look at. Ultimately, I don't think they leave. I think they wind up getting that somehow and building a new arena, and Seattle's just used as a scary bat full of nails and other sharp objects that the NBA and its owners kind of brandish menacingly at areas that kind of balk at paying for new arenas or renovations.
Yep.
But there were a few other interesting points in the article that weren't specifically just about the franchise.
Yep.
Some of them were about Jason Kidd, who, as you guys know, Will and I aren't too fond of the guy personally, but he's done some interesting stuff as a coach so far.
Yep.
He's giving the team tests.
Written tests.
Yeah, written tests every game day before, the games, where it's about basketball strategy and history. And it's something that he picked up from Dallas, where Coach Carlisle and then assistant coach Terry Stotts would have the team do that.
Yep. And
it's their way of kind of not only, facilitating more team cohesion from having the whole, we're in this together type thing, and we all got to do this. But also it facilitates more discussion with the players. And specifically, it also gets younger players thinking more about basketball strategy and about basketball history. And it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that Jason Kidd encourages cheating.
Yeah.
And not cheating
is that really that interesting, though, considering Sodagate?
True.
Yeah.
Wait, was it soda or was it water?
It was soda.
It was soda?
Yeah.
Because it'd be really cool if it could be Watergate too.
That would have been cool.
But it was soda.
Yeah. Electric Boogaloo.
Exactly.
There was also an interesting quote in there from Jason Kidd, which kind of was almost like Kidd was trying to engender goodwill with Will and I.
Yeah.
Where he said, we all want guys
You're making me like you,
do...
Jason. I don't like this. This is uncomfortable.
We all want guys to do everything, but sometimes something just doesn't develop. But we shouldn't get caught up in what a player can't do. We need to focus on what he can do. And when Brandon Knight, does that, the floor will open up for him. The game will slow down. I appreciate that quote and what it means, because one of the big tenets that Will and I follow is, look at what a guy can do, not what he can't do. And
what he can't do isn't going to win you games.
Exactly, and you got to see, is he being put in a situation to do what he can do, or is he being put in a situation where he's asked to do something he can't do?
Yep.
It was also interesting, though, that quote, because there was a subsequent little note about Jason Kidd's time in Phoenix when he first came to Phoenix, and he was playing with Kevin Johnson and Danny Ainge, and he didn't really appreciate Kevin Johnson's game because he felt like it wasn't how a true point guard should play. And Danny Ainge, there was a quote from Danny Ainge that was kind of interesting and countered what Kidd just commented in that earlier quote, that he remembers talking with Jason Kidd when he was a young player with the Suns, and said Jason had a great mind for the game, but he was a typical young kid who wanted to win every single game. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But teaching Jason to not only tolerate his teammates, but to actually value what they could do was a task, which caught me off guard because I always, I guess, bought into the narrative that Jason Kidd was this team-centric dude from the get-go. And was the guy that, okay, he needs the ball here and in these situations to be successful and so forth. So I always felt like he naturally valued what guys could do. But apparently that wasn't the case, which is kind of interesting to find out.
Yeah, I don't understand how someone could get mad at Kevin Johnson for shooting too much. The guy's like a brilliant scorer. That's kind of his game, And that's the thing. Kind of getting to something a little more broad, there's this sort of narrative between scoring point guards and team first passing point guards, the true point guards. And honestly, if a guy like a Damian Lillard, who can score like crazy from pretty much anywhere, I would say Stephen Curry, but Stephen Curry has become one of the best facilitators in basketball. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of scoring point guards, and people kind of look at that like it's a negative sometimes. But ultimately, that's what that guy can do, and bringing that back into this, when we focus on what players' skill sets allow them to accomplish and how that can fit into an overarching team structure that can actually win games and complement each other, that's when you really start having some power and you can really start doing some things. But when we get caught up in notions of what a certain player is supposed to do based on predetermined notions of things like positions, which really are kind of BS.
Yeah, positions were only created in order to make things a little easier to define for people when the game was first being introduced.
Yeah, the average team has 14 people on its roster? 30 teams in the league? Somewhere in that range, right?
12 to 15. Yep.
12 to 15, okay. Well, there are well over 300 positions in the NBA.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of thing. And with Jason Kidd now, he really is starting to understand. He's a huge advocate for literally that. The brilliant thing, we talked on this earlier. What they're doing now with what they call positionless basketball, it isn't entirely positionless, but he really does. That is a major tenet of what Jason Kidd is doing, is he is focusing almost entirely on a role. So if you have a guy like Giannis, who can bring the ball up and is a decent ball handler, still needs to work on, maintaining his turnovers for one, and he could improve as a facilitator, but guys like 19 or 20 or 12 or whatever. And
also it takes practice in game situations to improve anyway.
So exactly. Yeah. But get him out, and if he can defend 1 through 4, holy cow, you're onto something. Same thing with a guy like Jabari. Looking at his skill set, a lot of people would say, oh, he's a wing. But like we've mentioned earlier,
small ball 4.
Yep. So when you focus on what a player can do and how to put him in that situation, I think that is Jason Kidd's biggest strength as a coach.
Yeah, I would concur.
Cool. So the biggest strength for some NBA teams right now is that they are getting lucky, as Krishna Nasru from Nylon Calculus, the always awesome Nylon Calculus, did an awesome piece on that. You found this one, Josh, so why don't you explain to the people what it's about?
Yeah, so Krishna he came up with some sort of stat called lucky. Mm-hmm. And lucky is basically the number of points scored on open shots at each location, so restricted area, 3 to 5 feet, mid-range, and threes, and then the number of expected points scored on open shots at each location. And then you add up all of those points for both the actual points and the expected points, subtract the expected points from the actual points, you get the difference, and that helps you see how many teams are just getting lucky in terms of opponents just not hitting those open shots. And this touches on something Will and I have talked about before in some of our videos, that there is randomness and there's luck that play into this. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'll get wide open looks. They'll be perfect looks and it just won't fall. Likewise, sometimes you'll get super tough, crazy looks and it falls.
Yep. Especially 20 games into the season.
Yeah, exactly. Lucky touches upon this. Yeah. And Krishna found that both Houston and OKC currently lead the league in lucky. In other words, their defense has benefited greatly from opponents not hitting open shots against them at the same rate that they would be expected to.
Yep. Houston...
Which isn't... Yeah, it doesn't say anything about Houston or OKC's defense because those were open shots.
Yep.
So it's not like OKC and Houston are somehow mean-mugging them from a distance and therefore the opposing
Kendrick Perkins stares.
Like, no.
Kendrick Perkins is staring at them so that they miss.
Yeah. So they've just been lucky so far, and because of that, Krishna believes they're likely to regress defensively. And in fact, when you look at it from the perspective of how would they do if their opponents had shot just average expected from those open looks, and the Rockets would have dropped from second in points allowed per shot to 8th, and the Thunder would have dropped from 5th to 24th.
Yeah, wow.
Now, of course, the Thunder are getting Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant back now, and everyone's starting to get back and working towards being fully healthy, so that's probably not really going to be that big a drop-off. And he also noted that Dallas is has been very unlucky defense-wise in this scenario, and that's likely to regress a little bit more towards the mean, which is something other teams should probably be concerned about because Dallas's offense has been gangbusters so far.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So one thing that I saw from this that could be kind of crazy, it is entirely possible because the Thunder actually have a surprisingly not terrible record.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be total garbage for the start of the year because missing Russ and missing KD.
Yep.
And in that offensive system with that sort of personnel that they have aside from those guys, wasn't expecting that to work very well. It isn't, to me, I'm reading this, I'm thinking it could be possible that Oklahoma City getting lucky in this first month or so actually gets them into the playoffs.
Yeah. I would not be surprised. Of course, it's not the first time OKC's gotten lucky.
No. But speaking of getting lucky, if the Nets are going to be able to do any sort of rebuilding, Billy King is going to have to get more lucky than that new Daft Punk song that came out. He's going to have to be up all night to get lucky.
Yeah, pretty much. So apparently, according to ESPN at least, league sources have been saying that the Nets, who are off to a pretty rough start so far, are looking to retool their supremely expensive roster and therefore might be a little open to trading any of their core players, in this case, Deron Williams, Brook Lopez, or Joe Johnson. Now, of course, the sources say that there's no imminent trade involving any of the three players right now, but Billy King, when asked about if he thought that core could win, he said, "We'll see." And, you know, they've mentioned in the public sphere that they're taking calls and they're not seemingly, just telling people no. So part of this is probably just, ESPN reading into it a little bit. But I also wouldn't be surprised, given they shelled out $190 million last year when you factor in luxury tax, for what happened. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're maybe thinking about making some moves. And the team's still apparently in a win-now mentality, so even if they were to make moves, they're not necessarily looking for young prospects or draft picks or anything. They'd be looking for players that would be able to help them maintain competitiveness. They did actually make a trade. They are sending Andrei Kirilenko, who's one of my faves, love AK, a 2020 second rounder and the right to swap 2018 second rounder, whether it be theirs or the Cleveland Cavaliers second rounder that they have, and cash for Brandon Davies. At least that's what Woj said, and Woj is very good at his job, so I'll believe him.
Yeah, that trade. So how many picks does New Jersey, that goes to show where my head's at today, Brooklyn even have anymore? They traded a 2020 second. They traded the right to swap in 2018. So really, then what are they going to use to bait people into taking those huge-ass contracts?
See, yeah, that's the other thing. Trades are a two-way street, and sometimes a 3 or 4-way street.
Yeah.
And you got to have something that the other teams want. And Darren Williams is playing better this year, but he still his career's on the downturn still.
He is not getting paid like his career is on the downturn,
since
too.
Utah, and he's paid very handsomely. Joe Johnson, we've discussed, I think Joe Johnson's actually somewhat underrated, but his contract is definitely not.
You can be overpaid and underrated.
Nobody's necessarily wanting to bring on the third highest contract in the league right now. And then Brooke Lopez is constantly injured and is a 7-footer who's got repeated lower limb injuries, which is very frightening. So without a bevy of attractive young players on the roster or draft picks to entice, I don't think they're going to get much better in return if they do trade these guys.
Yeah, they're pretty screwed.
Yeah, but there's one follow-up that was kind of a linked thing to this story that I found on the NBA subreddit, which I thought was actually a really nice way to look at this, because... Who
wrote it? Let me tell you.
You'd have to look. I think it's
Tiradillos from Reddit.
Yeah.
I have no idea if I got that username right, dude. I am highly sorry.
Shout out, though.
Yeah, you're cool.
So there was a thread on why haven't the Nets fired Billy King, and we've all thought this. I myself have said many times that Billy King's the worst GM in the league, and it's laughable he still keeps getting jobs.
Yeah.
But this person has the right perspective on this, and they noted that a lot of this is contextual too, and just, once again, context is something you gotta factor in.
Context rules everything around Billy King.
Yes, Billy King was told to make a contender right away. In fact, in that introductory press conference with Mikhail Prokhorov buying the team, he said, we will win a championship in 5 years. So there's organizational pressure from the very top, from day one of Billy King's tenure, to win now. And it wasn't just because, the owner wanted to make a splash and wanted to look good and show that he's awesome. People forget that not only does Prokhorov own the Nets, but he also owns part of the whole Barclays Center area.
Yep.
And he wanted the team to be winning, and therefore there to be buzz and popularity about going to their games at the new arena, because that drives more interest in that entire area of which he has a stake in.
Yeah.
And if you can help with the gentrification of that area, that's more money in his pocket. And so Billy King was pressured to make all these moves that are terrible moves, but they were win now moves that he was pressured to make, like getting Joe Johnson's contract, strictly because Darren Williams was a free agent and they wanted to make sure. The same thing with Gerald Wallace. They traded for both of those guys despite large contracts, simply to say, hey Darren, look, we want to win, come back please. And Darren did, and then that of course was followed up by quite possibly the worst trade I've ever seen, which three unprotected picks,
which could very well go in the lotto.
Yes, I'll put it this way. In my opinion, you never trade an unprotected pick.
Those picks need condoms. Never.
It doesn't matter if you're getting LeBron James, because guess what? What happens if he takes the physical, everything's signed off on, he's now a member of your team, and then he slips on ice getting off the plane the next day and tears everything in his knee? Guess what? You just gifted them a top 3 pick.
Yes.
You know? You never give up an unprotected draft pick unless it's absolutely essential and you know for a fact that your team is going to be competitive enough that it's not going to be lotto. And Nats can't say that.
No.
And they gave up 3, and more specifically, they gave up 3 unprotected picks for 3 players who are all 35 or older at the time. Kevin Garnett,
2 of whom are
Jason
gone.
Terry, and Paul Pierce.
2 of whom are gone, 1 of whom who probably should be.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a reason why Billy King gets a lot of crap thrown his way, sometimes by myself, I admit. But it's important to remember the context that he was working under. And because we weren't there, we don't necessarily know if there were better options that still would have been win now moves, and how much influence Prokhorov or Prokhorov's people had on saying, you know, we have to do this, Billy. You pull the trigger on this particular deal. And to be fair, Billy has, on the fringes of the roster, found some really nice pieces. Mason Plumlee, Mirza Teletovic, Bojan Bogdanovic, Reggie Evans, Sean Livingston saved their season last year, and Billy King brought him on the cheap. And even in the past draft, he picked up Corey Jefferson with the 60th pick, and he picked up Will's boy Markel Brown in the 2nd round. So he's not completely terrible as a front office.
He has skills.
And, you know, we should always try to remember the context, even ourselves, which, like I said, I've probably been slightly too harsh on Billy King. That said, I would not want him running my franchise.
No.
But, you know.
Yeah. One guy who I would be okay on my franchise, I would actually be really happy, because that would probably mean that less playing time for Josh Smith. That'd be Chris Bosh and Zach Lowe. We're doing Zach Lowe Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Wrote a nice piece on Grantland. It was a nice little interview with Chris Bosh. Really said some eye-opening stuff.
Yeah.
So the thing with Bosh is he's like a 9-time All-Star, won 2 rings, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
But then everyone calls him like soft serve and cream puff, marshmallow dude, defense.
Stay puffed.
Yeah. They're not very nice to Chris Bosh. They say it was like a pterodactyl.
Yeah.
They're not nice. But Bosh can ball out of his mind, you know. And he's shown that really in Miami. He has shown that if you're watching. And he's really showing it this year, even if you aren't watching as closely as you should be. The dude can ball out of his brain, so I think that quieted those critics quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's averaging 22 and 8. in that number one option overall again. And it's funny because I remember, if you guys go back and watch our Heat preview, we talked about, everyone's going to act like they're not going to be that great. Chris Bosh is... Chris Bosh is freaking good. And not only is he no longer Toronto Bosh, he's not CB4 anymore, he's better. And he's been better the past 4 years that everyone's been giving him shit.
Yeah, he's not CB4, he's CB3! Because he's making those things.
He's developed a three-point shot. He's become a better defender, both man and team. And his entire game's just improved by leaps and bounds. And not to toot our own horn, but we were talking about Bosh is going to have a hell of a year this year, once again getting shot attempts, which, once again, context, the first 4 years he was third in shot attempts. Kind of hard to put up crazy numbers when you're, not getting a whole lot of shots. And that's changed, and he's putting up numbers, and people are like, oh my god, he's Toronto Bosh again. No, he always was. In fact, he's always been better since then because he's improved as a player, and now he's getting a chance to show it. Yeah.
So, aside from Chris Bosh being awesome, a lot of the stuff that was really interesting in this piece was about some of the pressure that he faced in Miami. Bosh is a really interesting dude. Really, if you can watch the interviews with this guy, he is just a super interesting dude, and he has some really, really astute insights here. Quotes saying, like, it was draining just to get out there again for the fourth time in a row. You're trying to three-peat and do all these things. That's what a lot of people misinterpret when we say it wasn't fun. That's the reason it wasn't fun. To live up to expectations isn't fun. It's fun for maybe the first year, but the third year and fourth year, it's just very, very difficult.
Yeah. And he had another pretty good quote when asked a question by Zach about kind of how the league is nowadays and how tough it is to compete in this league and from a team perspective. And he said, yeah, you have to trust each other. The Spurs trust each other to the fullest. It's the best basketball I ever saw. And I told them that after they beat us. That's why I wasn't really that bummed out. I was like, man, if I'm going to get beat, it's by you guys. I can respect that.
Yeah. Not to chill out the Spurs again, but to totally chill on the Spurs again. That's the thing, the media narrative surrounding that Miami team, it's crazy. That team was under an insane amount of pressure. If anybody on that team farted, it was on ESPN Top 10 highlights.
True.
Like, it was crazy. It's kind of insane how you have someone like Chris Bosh, who obviously loves this game. It sounds like a lot of the fun just kind of got sucked out of it.
Yeah, and that's what people sometimes forget is the 82-game season is a grind, and then you throw in playoffs on that. And if you're going to multiple deep runs in the playoffs, that equates to playing an entire extra season over the course of, say, 3-4 years of
they played over 400 games.
The conference finals. Yeah, they played an extra season basically in the last 4 years.
Speaking of another season, Tracy McGrady was rumored for a little bit that he was going to come back in the NBA and play another season, but I think that kind of got put to rest.
Yeah, on his Facebook page, Tracy made a statement saying that I know you all may have read the Bleacher Report article, which we'll discuss in a second, but I have no plans on coming back to the NBA. I'm a happily retired man. Always appreciate the love you all give, but my playing days are no more. On to other ventures. This rumor came about because there are some interesting quotes in what's actually a really good Bleacher Report article on Tracy McGrady and what he's been up to after his playing career called The Game Does Not Leave Gently or something like that.
Yep, Les Carpenter did a great job on it.
Yeah, and there's a quote in there. Well, there's a few quotes. I'll mention the two that kind of started this rumor. First one is, my body is in shape. I can go. It's all about opportunity, though. I want no limits on who I am and what I can do, not stand in the corner and shoot jump shots. I want to be involved. That's not saying 10 to 15 shots. I want to be involved. I don't want to stand in the corner and shoot threes. That's not me. But he also had a second quote that was, I'm better than half the damn league anyway. Which, at 35, given how he played last, I'm inclined to disagree. But
maybe
having
he
had
didn't specify. To be fair, he didn't specify which league.
Touche. Well put.
He could be talking D League. He could be talking NBL. He could be talking.
That's a good point. I'm inclined to think he meant NBA, but yeah. So there were that's kind of where this rumor started, and he goes on to talk a little bit about his thoughts on the league now and the younger players in it, and of course, Tracy McGrady was one of the more high-profile, straight from high school to NBA players, and I think part of this comes from the fact that T-Mac was insanely good.
Yes,
like he really could do pretty much anything on the court. He could score better than the vast majority of people I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, there are a few years where he was the best scorer in the league. Sorry, Kobe, but he was.
Oh, no, easily.
Sorry.
And on top of that, he was a really good facilitator.
Yep. Again, sorry, Kobe.
Yeah, he could rebound. When he was really locked in, he could defend better than most wings in the entire NBA.
Yeah.
And there's a quote in there that I think is actually pretty apt. T-Mac at his healthiest was complete in ways few have ever been complete.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, that's pretty apt.
It's a shame those years were on, or at least a lot of those years were on a kind of poopy Magic team.
It wasn't kind of poopy. It was a very poopy Magic team where, with the exception of Mike Miller, he really didn't have a whole lot of high caliber.
Yeah, everyone was all hype. Oh, they got Grant Hill, and then Grant Hill got really injured.
Well, Grant Hill's ankle didn't really travel with him to Orlando.
Yeah, they got Grant Hill minus an ankle.
Yeah. He goes on, though, to talk a little bit, like I said, about the young players in the league nowadays. And he says the league is so young and they have no skills.
Oh!
They have athleticism, but no skills. Half these guys wouldn't be able to play in the NBA when I first came into it. There's only a handful I enjoy watching anyway. And when Kevin Durant and LeBron are gone, who's going to carry the league? There's no LeBron or Kevin Durant in the next batch.
That's a little bitter old man sounding thing.
A little bit, but
there's some truth to it. There is some truth to it, but a lot of these young guys coming up, and he is right that there is a trend, and I kind of blame. I blame the way we watch basketball as fans and as spectators for a lot of it.
ESPN.
Jordan Fallacy, ESPN, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I blame the AAU circuit a lot. I blame the NCAA a bit for some of the things we've, and a lot of those programs really are not awesome. I'm looking at you, Kentucky, and sorry, shots fired again. I'm on a roll today. But there are a lot of young guys who can ball out of their minds. Some of them in the league. We're talking like Anthony Davis. Holy crap. Even some of the guys in this upcoming draft class, very, very, very highly skilled. This upcoming draft class, I'm pretty high on a lot of the people in it, and there are a lot of people here who do have skills, people who can be good process defenders, people who can shoot, people who can pass, people who can be really good rim protectors in terms of not just like, I'm going to jump at every single shot, but in terms of actually being able to play solid interior defense. There's a couple guys like that. We have guys who can operate from the mid-range. We have guys who can score on the post. Basketball skills aren't dead.
No. But I don't think he meant that either.
But there is no LeBron, there is no KD, there is no players who can be that transcendent in the next batch, in terms of, I'm assuming he's talking about young players.
Yeah.
No. There are always going to be really, really good players because there are always people playing basketball, and some of them are always going to be really good.
True. And I mean, Anthony Davis is probably making that leap right now as a, generational type player, which is what LeBron and KD are, which is, I think, what T-Mac was kind of talking about. But, I'm with you that it's a little overblown in how T-Mac put it, but I also believe that there is a significant bias in the NBA towards athleticism, youth, and
length.
That whole
things that are not being good at basketball.
Potential that is encompassed by, would this guy get on ESPN top 10 highlights, basically.
Yeah.
We can teach him the game.
It's basically everything that is not being good at basketball.
Yeah. It's the stuff that, if you are good at basketball, makes you into one of the greatest players of your generation. But if you're not good at basketball, just makes you into a highlight reel player who doesn't actually have a major impact on the game. Something I call a Ricky Davis triple-double corollary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we talked about this with the Paul Pierce statement a couple weeks ago, where he said that he didn't think he'd get drafted, and he retracted that, and then said he'd get drafted late first round because of his skill set and because he wasn't very athletic. But by NBA player standards, compared to both of us, he can make us look ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
But he... there is, you're right, that bias coming in, we are seeing it a lot. And do you think that the whole one and done trend has anything to do with it at all?
Partly, but I mean, we've had it before where players could, like T-Mac, could jump straight from high school to the NBA. So I don't think one and done is necessarily the problem.
Because I remember Adam Silver saying something this week, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the link with all the other articles, where he wanted the age limit raised to 20.
Yeah, no, he's said that repeatedly since he became commissioner. Like, if you look at most interviews with Adam Silver, it comes up.
So, do you think that would help at all to get these players to develop skills? I mean, because I don't think the NBA is necessarily the most conducive environment to develop.
Well, it's interesting because it's kind of a two-way street, or a double-edged sword, more aptly. Mm-hmm. In that, in the NBA, it's your job, so you don't have to go to court, to classes, and
hopefully you don't have to go to
so
court.
You have more time to actually work on your game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't really have a whole lot of practice time during the NBA season. There's too much travel and trying to get rest, and you just don't have enough time to truly, really dig in and develop, especially if you're trying to get that player in-game development, which, it's one thing for them to work with the player development coaching staff and spend some time in the D League. It's still different than getting reps in an NBA game.
Totally.
And because the schedule is the way it is, it's tough for young players, to really get that in the NBA level. But on the same token, in college, there's limits on how much they can practice, and a coach, especially the high-profile players who are likely to leave after 1 year in the first place, and even if it were 2 years, you're still not going to have a whole lot of development necessarily, a lot of time to develop one specific player over that time period. So it's kind of you're screwed either way, and it just kind of depends on are you in the right circumstances, and does this player have the right work ethic and everything to really maximize
crazy. This is
it.
really only an American issue.
Yeah, that's in part because of how the way things are run other places.
Yeah.
There's sports academies where that they're trained from a very young age all the way up, and we obviously don't do things that way here.
Hey,
and,
Yeah, that's kind of gross.
But there was another element of this Tracy McGrady article that I really wanted to touch on because I actually found it more interesting than the basketball side of things. And first off, there was this interesting point that, T-Mac's 35 now, and people forget, he never went to college. He's just a high school graduate, but his net worth has been estimated at $80 million.
Yeah.
This is precisely why the NBPA, the Players Association, and their new head director has been publicly adamant about opposing the raising of that age minimum.
Yep.
Because, T-Mac, he graduated high school. In any other industry, if you're able to go pro, you can go pro. And if they raise this age minimum even one more year, that's one less year that player has of earning potential in their career. And, that's
for
something that
a 12-year
obviously...
career, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and that's something that matters very heavily to the Players Association. So I thought that was an interesting little thing. But also, the most interesting thing to me was what T-Mac's doing
with that,
from a business perspective. And they discussed this plan that he has where he's going to kind of help mentor athletes and entertainers, aka people who kind of become suddenly wealthy.
Yep.
And help them learn about minority-owned manufacturers and then invest in those companies, helping to bring capital and jobs to the very neighborhoods where they grew up.
Yeah.
So kind of reinvesting in their own communities. And obviously that's a simplistic way to look at it, and it's more complicated than that, but it includes education and support for athletes and entertainers, and it helps link kind of small minority-owned manufacturers with bigger companies that they could help each other mutually. They mentioned like a carpet company in Memphis being paired up with a car company in need of floor mats, for instance. Stuff like that.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem like a lot, but on a grander scale, if you're doing this in a lot of areas, you're talking about bringing development and tons more jobs.
Yeah.
And just more enrichment of the community. And that to me is really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't seen the 30 for 30 called Broke,
yep,
highly recommend it. You definitely should, now. But that is absolutely a needed thing. The NBA is one of the leagues where players will spend a little bit more time generally over the course of their career than even in some other. The NFL is the worst.
Yeah,
at it.
Non-guaranteed contracts will do that to you with a sport that also involves very potential career-ending injuries.
Yeah, so I think that's really important, that these people who become suddenly wealthy actually have a way to maintain some of that.
Yeah.
This isn't just millionaires finding ways to stay millionaires. A lot of these people literally go bankrupt, and we've seen Robert Swift. Robert Swift needed this.
Yeah.
That's just sad. But one thing that's happy is KJ McDaniels is balling out of his mind.
Yes. So we've mentioned before that KJ kind of made this interesting bet on himself.
Yep.
Normally, especially Philly and Houston have this tendency with their second-round draft picks to offer them 4-year deals, where the first 2 years are guaranteed at slightly above league minimum salary, and then the second 2 years are team options. And those are also about league salary, the league average minimum salary. And KJ said no and bet on himself, and he took the qualifying offer, which is, for people who don't know, completely non-guaranteed.
Yep.
So his salary this year is completely non-guaranteed. If he got injured or something, or just pissed off Hinkie or something, they could cut him right now and he would not get the rest of his money. But he made that bet because he had confidence that he'd be able to show both Philly and other teams in the league what he could do.
To be fair, it's a pretty easy bet to make when you're on the Sixers.
Yeah, and
I'm gonna get minutes.
Free agency next year.
Yeah,
and so far it's paying off, isn't it, Will?
Oh, absolutely. The guy can definitely ball, and Philly or whoever else is going to be forced to make that contract decision way before they're going to want to.
Yeah,
well, good.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is he's a 3. He's a wing, and he's listed at 6'6", but he's 13th in the league in block percentage.
Yeah, and he gets a lot. And he gets a lot of those. And at least from what I've seen, I haven't watched that many Philly games this year, which sorry. I hope you can't blame me. But he gets a lot of those inside. He does get blocks on the perimeter as well, but he gets a lot of those blocks inside on post players sometimes coming in as a weak side guy or coming in off of help, which really valuable skill. And if they're playing, and I don't even know how any of these guys fit together, but KJ, Nerlens, and Embiid, that rim is like triple protected.
Yep.
That's kind of scary.
If he continues this pace over the course of the season, he will wind up as being the most prolific shot blocker at 6'6" in NBA history.
Not
as surprising. A rookie.
Yeah, that's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
And there are some other good things in his game, too. He's showing a pretty significantly improved three-point shot. It's still a little below league average, but considering that terrible offense, that's about what you'd expect. And if he can be a 3, like a lowercase 3, essentially, in D guy, that would be really, really valuable and definitely needed for this team. And holy cow, this guy, I mean, some of these blocks are crazy. Just the highlights on him.
Yeah, I think he said he spiked one so hard into like the front row that a lady that got hit by the ball actually had a concussion.
That sounds like a lawsuit, man. And
he sent her flowers afterwards to say sorry. But
oh, well, that was nice.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that gets on SportsCenter highlights.
But this lady getting concussed is a not top 10.
It also illustrates an interesting thing in that as good a kind of rim protector as he is right now, there's still areas for improvement. And a lot of rim protectors suffer from this. And it's something that, guys like Bill Walton and Bill Russell used to do all the time. You don't have to swat the ball out of bounds.
Yeah.
You just have to stop it from getting in the basket. You can just slow the roll on it. You don't have to slap it and scream.
Give it to a teammate if you can.
Warrior. You can some player, Walton specifically, I know used to catch the ball and then just launch it for a outlet pass.
Yeah.
And so if he gets to that point where he's just essentially tapping it so that he or a teammate can then catch it and then start a fast break, he'll be even more impactful.
Yeah, because how many of those either get turned into like offensive rebound situations where it can be turned into a putback, or it just goes out of bounds?
Yep, returns the ball right back to offense. Yeah.
So yeah, like a lot of times, some of those blocks it winds up almost being like it would have just been better if you just contested it.
Yeah.
I think kind of blocks are kind of overrated.
They are.
It's not like a steal where it actually guarantees that your team gets the ball back.
True. And steals are also overrated.
Yes, they are.
Something that's not overrated is Zach Lowe, especially in this thing, as this is like the third Zach Lowe piece. But he's been prolific this week.
Yeah.
Today he put something out about the NBA's new plan on the schedule.
On the schedule.
Yes, the schedule. And
the sensual. No.
Hopefully not. And, he mentioned that over the past 2 weeks, the league has kind of informally surveyed team executives about the idea of cutting the preseason schedule potentially by half, and then starting the regular season earlier so that the 82-game season is stretched out over a slightly larger span of time, which would theoretically reduce some of those back-to-back issues and kind of make it a little easier on the players in terms of health and rest, which we've discussed. Rest is important, and this is something that I'm all for. I hope they do it. Nobody really cares about preseason games. Coaches probably care. Well, coaches who've had a lot of turnover on their team and new coaches probably care because it's a time where they get a little more practice before the season starts. But this still wouldn't eat into training camp or, preseason practices and stuff.
Yeah, so. And if it prevents one of their players from getting an injury, I'm sure they'll be fine with it. Yeah. So,
and I can tell you for a fact, GMs and owners aren't always. They have to set up the preseason schedule, not the NBA, really. So that's just an added hassle for them. That they have to negotiate with other owners and front office execs to try to figure out, okay, where are we going to play this? Who gets what out of the ticket revenue if it's at a neutral site and blah, blah, blah. It's a pain in the butt, and I'm sure they would happily welcome, less preseason and getting to that regular season revenue quicker.
Yep. Yeah, we've been talking about this for quite some time. Now if they can just push the finals back to the draft.
Yep. And then stretch out that 82-game season from, halfway through the current preseason up to, like we said, just push the finals back a week. Just a week.
Yeah.
And you help space out that season a little bit more so that it wouldn't fix everything. It'd still be 82 games over a small stretch of time, but it would make it a little easier, and you'd see less of those 4 games in 5 nights and 3 games in 4 nights type deals.
Absolutely. So speaking of nights, ABC has a show hopefully coming to televisions near you, hopefully prime time. You'll be watching it
I get the feeling that that's what the plan is.
Yeah. So why don't you...
I'm excited about it.
Why don't you tell the people about what this is going to be?
So apparently ABC, which as we know, ABC has a relationship with the NBA.
Yep.
They're a broadcast partner. They are planning a buddy comedy pilot that's based in the NBA.
Yep.
So you guys may not know my kind of pyramid of awesomeness in my life.
Yep.
It starts at the top with my wife, family and friends, basketball, movies, TV.
Yeah.
And then like everything else is just kind of like, whatever. Yeah. So I love movies and TV. And I'm a huge fan of buddy comedies.
Yeah.
Scrubs, Psych. Some of my favorite movies are the Cornetto trilogy with Nick Frost, Simon Pegg. I love buddy comedies, and I love the NBA. So the idea of a buddy comedy that takes place in the NBA, if done well, appeals very greatly to me. And so the ABC has given a pilot commitment to this new comedy, and interestingly enough, one of the executive producers is one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors, Peter Guber. And the synopsis is that it's a buddy comedy set in the world of the NBA about a rookie who doesn't speak English and a translator who doesn't speak basketball. So they say it's kind of like the International Odd Couple, but set in the NBA.
Yeah.
So kind of think about like a funnier version of the Year of Yao documentary, which was totally real and based on Yao and his interpreter for his rookie year. That sounds awesome to me if they do things right. And The one major problem they have that's going to be tough to fix, though, is can you find a 7-foot foreigner who can deliver a joke?
Well, there's a bunch of them already in the NBA. Obviously, they couldn't do that. They have, like, commitment and stuff.
Exactly.
But I thought it'd be cool for us to go through some people who we think would be in the NBA who would be fun to start with this. So I think it'd be hilarious if they could get Marcin Gortat.
I think by far the top choice, bar none, would be Blake Griffin, but there's no way that's
Blake Griffin
happen.
with an accent.
I would watch it even if Blake were trying like an Australian accent or a British accent. I don't care.
Yeah,
Blake
British
Griffin
accent with the entire
Hollywood.
thing is that the guy can't speak English. That makes sense.
Yeah, put Blake Griffin in stuff Hollywood. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
But beyond Blake, I think Marcin Gortat would be fun. I think, surprisingly, Nikola Pekovic is supposedly the class clown of the Timberwolves. So he'd be interesting.
That'd be cool.
Giannis would be absolutely delightful.
It'd be if you want maybe for ABC Family, but I don't know.
It's ABC, so I don't think they're. I think Giannis would work.
Okay.
He'd qualify.
He'd qualify.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure there are some other guys out there. Dante Exum would be another interesting one, where he seems like he's a really cool dude and he's got that cool Australian accent. Of course, they basically speak English. So
they do speak
English. It wouldn't really work.
They do speak.
It is English, but it's the same English that England speaks, and we don't speak that English. So it's still different.
We don't throw the letter U into all these words like color.
Yeah. But,
weirdos?
Nah, different strokes for different folks. And technically, theirs was first, so we're the weirdos.
Okay. Why can't everybody be weirdos?
I think everybody is weirdos because there is no such thing as normal. Mind blow. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Who do you think would be the good for the interpreter?
Not sure. It'd have to be somebody who can have expert comedic timing, but I also wouldn't necessarily want anybody who's like slapstick.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want somebody who's bumbling because you're not going to get a translator job if you aren't calm, collected, and able to, obviously communicate well. So it'd have to be somebody who can play kind of the straight man role in the comedy duo. But I don't know exactly who I would choose. I would hope that they go maybe for like an unknown.
Okay.
I'm usually inclined to go for unknowns and try to give somebody a chance instead of just shoehorning in a star.
If they can find a way to bring Darko from wherever he is.
Darko's kickboxing now.
Darko's kickboxing now?
Seriously, yeah. He's supposed to start. He has his first match not too far from now.
Is he doing it in the States or is he doing it abroad?
No, I think it's international, but I don't know the specifics. I just saw somewhere that Darko Milicic's first fight is coming up soon. What? But it also makes sense.
His first fight was with Larry Brown. He lost.
I think he would have destroyed Larry Brown if it was an actual fight.
Okay, so I think that brings this one to a wrap. Thanks a bunch for watching, guys. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Comment if you have any thoughts. Also, we're doing a Q&A video.
Yes.
So if you have the questiones, we have the answerones.
Yes. So despite Will just embarrassing himself with that line, you can throw any questions that you want us to answer in our Q&A that hopefully we'll do next week.
Yeah.
At least film next week. Comment below. Let us know what questions you want. Julian, we're already going to...
yeah, we got you, man.
Count that Sixers, how we would deal with the Sixers right now. And anybody else, if you have a question you want us to answer, comment below, and we'll put that in the Q&A video for next week.
Yep, so if you like the vodcast, also think about sharing it on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, interpretive dance, robot dance, merengue dance, salsa dance, break dance.
The Antoine Walker I'm broke dance.
Oh, okay. And additionally, consider subscribing if you haven't already to be notified of our future videos. They're shorter than this one.
Yeah, this one ran a little long just because there were a lot of interesting things, and we cut out some articles too.
Yeah.
And also there was,
let us know.
We like talking.
Let us know if you think that this can go an hour. Because if you like going an hour, if you like the other ones that went 45 minutes, or if you want it shorter or longer, we're all ears at this point. This thing's pretty dang new. Yeah. So anyway, thanks a bunch for watching and listening and all the other senses and stuff that you do with your face and stuff.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the whole smelling of us, but yes.
Tasting would be kind of weird too, but if you're licking that monitor, do what you gotta do, man. All right.
I mean, whatever.
Well, peace out until next time, guys.
Take care, everyone.